Good morning, one and everyone. On behalf of the PG Department of English, Bankura Christian College, I, Abhilal Mukhopadhyay, undergraduate honors semester 4 student of the department, welcome you all to the 8th day of the International Lecture Series hosted by Department of English, Bankura Christian College. Warmest welcome and greetings to all the dignitaries, faculty members, research scholars, students, and one and everyone present on the virtual platforms, either on Google Meet Forum or on YouTube Live. We are honored to have among us today two eminent speakers, Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Culture Studies, the University of Garhwal, and Professor Nivedita Mukherjee, Professor of English, Sidhu Kanhu Birsa University. Before I request Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha sir to go ahead with his deliberation, I would like to request Professor Shivajyoti Karmakar sir to formally introduce Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha sir. Please, Shivajyoti Karmakar sir.
Thank you, Abhilal. I am glad to introduce my friend, an eminent scholar with a gifted ability of teaching, Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha, who is now an assistant professor at the Department of English and Culture Studies, the University of Garhwal. He was a part of the Department of English of Bankura Christian College from 2008 to 2010. Dr. Sinha has co-edited the book Indian Fiction in English, Mapping the Contemporary Literary Landscape in 2014, and Indian English Poetry and Drama, Changing Canons and Responses in 2019. He has published 18 articles and essays in several national and international journals and books, and has also presented more than 20 papers at national and international conferences and seminars. In 2019, he received funding from German Association for Postcolonial Studies and visited University of Bremen, Germany, to present a paper at an international conference organized by UG&PG. Dr. Sinha was invited by the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, SIMLA, for presenting a paper at an international seminar organized by the IIAS in 2019. His forthcoming publication is an essay on indentured diaspora, which will be published by Routledge, UK, in an edited volume on Kalapani crossing. The Department of English, Bankura Christian College, feels fortunate enough to have such an erudite, student-friendly scholar as our speaker. Today, Dr. Sinha will talk on assimilating the American culture, the question of hospitality in Bharati Mukherjee's Jasmine. And we all are confident enough that his lecture will surely be beneficial to all the students, research scholars, as well as for all the faculty members. So without wasting time, may I request Dr. Sinha to go ahead with his deliberation. Arnab, please.
Thank you, Shivajyoti. Shivajyoti, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so there is no problem in the voice. So first of all, in fact, I would like to thank the organizers, and the organizers happen to be, my former colleagues, and also a good old friend of mine, who is Shivajyoti, and also my student, Oyon. And I always, feel that I am in some way connected with Bankura Christian College, because Bankura Christian College happens to be, my first institution in that sense. I started my academic career at Bankura Christian College. So I always, look at this particular institution with a lot of respect, and I somehow feel that wherever I go, I am always connected with this institution, and this institution in fact has given me so much of space and so much of warmth, particularly as I said that when I joined this institution, and as it was my first appointment, I found a lot of warmth, and I was in a sense welcomed by the faculty members of the English department, and I never felt during my short service tenure that I was somebody who came from outside, and and somebody who is in a sense a stranger. Right from the day one, I always felt that I was a part of a family, a big family, and I am still a part of that big family. So with these few words, and obviously I thank Oyon because Oyon in fact requested me to deliver this lecture almost a fortnight ago, and then I had to prepare this lecture because in Bardhaman University we don't actually teach Bharati Mukherjee, and there is no text of Bharati Mukherjee in our syllabus. There are other texts which we actually teach in a paper which is titled Indian Diaspora. Not Indian diaspora, in fact, South Asian diaspora. So when Oyon actually asked me to choose from the syllabus that he had mailed me, I found this particular text quite interesting because I have been teaching South Asian diaspora, right from the very beginning of my teaching career at this university. So I felt that I could in some way do justice with this particular text, because the kind of knowledge I have in this particular field will at least help the students to understand this text in a different way. Now, at the outset, I also would like to point out that this is not in a sense a pure academic paper, because as Oyon has already told me that I would be primarily addressing the students. So I have in mind, my mind, obviously the students, particularly the PG students. So the lecture obviously has been planned in that way, and therefore I would be in fact interpreting the text, and obviously analyzing the text in such a way that the students are able to understand, or rather grasp this particular text, or understand this particular text from the perspective that I'm trying to explain. And I would be elaborating less on the theoretical paradigm, because if I focus more on the theoretical aspects, then at times it may become a bit confusing for the students. But then theory would be there. The theoretical paradigm of hospitality would be mentioned by me, and I would rather focus on that, obviously. But I won't deal with the dense theoretical idea of hospitality, because that would in a sense confuse the students. So in the first part of my lecture, obviously I intend to focus on the text and obviously introduce the background of this particular text, and then in the second part of my lecture I shall interpret this particular text, keeping in mind Derrida's concept of hospitality. Because if you focus on my title, then obviously two things are quite important. One is the aspect of assimilation, how Mukherjee in this particular short story tries to present this issue of assimilation, or tries to in a sense narrativize this aspect of assimilation, and at the same time how this aspect of assimilation is linked to the idea of hospitality, the Derridian concept of hospitality. And I would again like to reiterate that I will not deal too much with the dense theoretical paradigm of hospitality. I would just refer to hospitality as far as it would be rather easy for the students, easy for the students to understand this particular text. There are other issues which related to hospitality which probably I will not be able to address because of the abstract notions associated with hospitality. So let me just begin, and let me just begin with Bharati Mukherjee's novel, which is titled Jasmine. Because you need to keep in mind that this particular short story, Jasmine, was published in the year 1988, and it was published in a short story volume titled The Middleman and Other Short Stories. And after the publication of this particular volume, The Middleman and Other Short Stories in 1988, and obviously after Mukherjee received a very important prize. The prize happens to be the National Book Critics Award. She received the National Book Critics Award in 1988 for for publishing this particular volume of short story. And in 1989, then she published this novel, which is titled Jasmine. So there is a short story titled Jasmine, which you have in your syllabus, and which, as I said, was published in the short story collection, The Middleman and the Short Stories. And there is also a novel by Mukherjee, which was published in 1989, just 1 year after the publication of this particular short story volume. Now, what is quite interesting is the link between the short story and the novel. And this link, I think, is there between the novels that Mukherjee wrote in the later part of her career and the short stories that she published in this particular volume, which was obviously published in 1988. And the connection, I think, are many, because one particular connection that you find between this short story and the novel that Mukherjee wrote is the fact that there is at the center of these two narratives a traveling female protagonist who migrates to the US all alone from a remote location, and that location obviously is a place away from America. In the case of the novel, this place from where the female protagonist migrates is this place is actually a remote village in India, and in the novel, Jasmine actually is a Punjabi girl who travels all alone from a remote village in India to the US. And she is, as we find in the novel, she is an illegal female immigrant, a Punjabi girl, and she goes to America with a mission. Now, what that mission is and what actually happens in that story, I'm not going to tell, because that would be a kind of a digression. But she goes to US with a mission, and as we come to know from the novel, that she is an illegal immigrant in America. Now, this is another point that connects the novel with the short story. And in this short story that you have in your syllabus, Jasmine, you see that the girl Jasmine actually is an illegal immigrant in America. And in the novel Jasmine also, the Indian girl Jasmine is an illegal immigrant. And both these characters that appear in one who appears in the short story and another who appears in the novel, both belong to that typical liminal phase. Now, liminality is another particular approach through which we can study these two characters. But I won't be dealing with this particular concept of liminality, but liminality is a very important aspect, because these two girls, or these two different characters, one appearing in the novel and another in the short story, they happen to move from the liminal space to the center. And while moving from the liminal space to the center, they actually, perform certain actions. And that is how, they are through a kind of a process, or through these actions that they perform during the liminal phase, they become a part of, or they integrate themselves into the so-called mainstream American culture. Now, both these narratives, the novel and the short story, are such narratives that focus on this aspect of integrating into the American culture. Both these girls seek to become a part of the larger American mainstream culture. And this is quite interesting because when Mukherjee actually wrote these stories in the 1980s, in the late 1980s, that was the time when America was also, in a sense, expanding its national imaginary. Now, the situation, as we all know, changed in the first decade of the 21st century, particularly after 9/11, when America started closing its gates, and obviously also started increasing its surveillance at the border. Now, these stories are all, you must keep in mind, pre-9/11 stories, and these narratives were written in the late 1980s. So that was the time when America was, in a sense, expanding its national imaginary, and that was also the time when America was also, in a sense, welcoming the immigrants. And during that particular phase, Mukherjee, who herself as a writer became a part of this mainstream American culture, felt that she should write stories about these kinds of integrations into the American culture. So that's why one very important aspect that you find both in the short story and the novel is this aspect of assimilation. And that's why the emphasis of my lecture is on this aspect of assimilation. So Jasmine in the novel, and obviously Jasmine in the short story, they try to assimilate the American culture. And while assimilating this American culture, there is, as you find, a kind of, as I said, there is a kind of derooting and rerouting themselves. That means, on one hand, the characters, they seek to dissociate themselves from their native, or I would say indigenous ties, and on the other hand, they want to become a part of the larger American national structure. So if we look at it from the perspective of liminality, it is like, again, I won't like to deal too much on this particular theory of liminality, because these characters, as I said, they move from the liminal zone to the center, or into the mainstream culture. So as they move from the liminal zone into the mainstream culture, they perform certain actions, they perform certain rites and rituals in order to integrate themselves into the mainstream American culture. And what is quite interesting is the fact that there is a very, very conscious kind of movement from the idea of communitas. Communitas means obviously all those rites and rituals that are performed by people belonging to that particular liminal zone, and from a state of communitas they move into the larger American structure. So obviously here you can see that one can look at these two narratives from the perspective of the movement from the communitas. Now, communitas and structure, these are the two concepts that you find in Victor Turner's essay, which is titled Liminality and Communitas, where obviously he talks about this kind of transformation from the communitas, or the distinction between the communitas and the structure, and how certain characters, they move from this particular, what you can say, particular aspect of being in that state of communitas to the structure. So Jasmine, in both the narratives, happen to be, such a character who, in a sense, while undergoing this process of derooting, because they dissociate themselves from their indigenous ties and reroot themselves in America, while undergoing this kind of a process, while assimilating the American culture, while performing the necessary rites and rituals associated with that particular aspect of liminality, they ultimately become a part of the larger American structure. So that is something which is, I would say, and I would like to emphasize, which is very important in these two texts. So keeping in mind this particular aspect of, or this particular notion of assimilation, I would like to proceed further, and I would like to emphasize the very important aspect of this relationship between the so-called the Americans and the immigrants, because in this process of becoming a part of the mainstream American culture, what is quite significant is the fact that the Americans obviously happen to be the host, and those and in these two stories, and in these two stories, as I said, both in the novel and in the short story, and Jasmine happens to be an illegal immigrant. So obviously Jasmine is a host. So we need to look at this particular dynamics, or rather the relationship between the guest and the host. So Americans in these two narratives happen to be the host, and obviously Jasmine in these two stories or these two narratives happen to be the host. And therefore, the question of hospitality, the question of hospitality is quite significant. How far the Americans were hospitable, or how far this aspect of hospitality, in a sense, can help us to understand this particular process of assimilation. Because when this assimilation goes on, or this particular process of assimilation goes on, this relationship between host and guest plays a very, very vital role. Because if we go through Mukherjee's narratives, I'm talking about, or rather I would like to draw your attention to the novels that Mukherjee wrote, and obviously the other short stories, then you find that one particular aspect, apart from this aspect of derooting and rerouting that you find in her novels, another very important aspect that you find in her fictions is the fact that these characters, and this Mukherjee has also stated in one of her interviews, that her characters, particularly immigrant characters, who move from the third world to America, these characters metaphorically, according to Mukherjee, and this Mukherjee has said in one of her interviews, they metaphorically unhouse themselves, quote unquote, unhouse and rehouse. It's like obviously the process of derooting or uprooting oneself and rerouting one's own self in a different cultural condition. So it's all about also metaphorically looking at this process of derooting and rerouting from the perspective of unhousing and housing. So house, and obviously house in this context, we can very well understand, means a kind of a location where there is some kind of adjustment. When we focus on this metaphor of unhousing means obviously the process of derooting. But then what Mukherjee says, that this also metaphorically draws our attention to the idea of rehousing. Rehousing means how these characters, in a sense, adjust themselves in the entire socio-cultural condition in America. And there, this relationship between the host and the guest plays a very, very vital role. Now, at this juncture, I would like to draw your attention to two very important notions that I believe happen to be very important in the context of our discussion. One is the notion of logos, and this obviously I am referring to Derrida's concept of hospitality. Logos, and obviously the another concept that Derrida refers is xenos, X-E-N-O-S, xenos. Now, logos obviously is the rational logic based on which a particular idea is built. So the logos in the context of Derridian notion of hospitality and is obviously the ruling logic based on which a country or a nation is built. And xenos, the idea of the xenos means the stranger, and a stranger interacts with these logos. So we can look at this particular relationship between logos and xenos from the perspective of the relationship, or from the perspective of the interaction between the American culture or the American people and the xenos in the context of our discussion happens to be, this character Jasmine, because Jasmine is the xenos, the stranger. She has come to America and she interacts with the logos, the ruling logic, the based on which the American nation has been built, and she is that immigrant who is interacting with the logos. So Derrida therefore says that it is due to this interaction between the logos and the xenos that the notion of hospitality actually comes to the foreground. And while discussing this notion of hospitality, Derrida says that one can look at hospitality from two different contexts, or from two different perspectives. One is the perspective of unconditional hospitality, and another is obviously the perspective of conditional hospitality. Now, in this short story that is titled Jasmine, we find that both the perspectives are there: unconditional hospitality and conditional hospitality. Unconditional hospitality is a notion that obviously we find in Derrida's critical writing, and Derrida says that unconditional hospitality is like an absolute hospitality, where a stranger, or rather a foreigner, is welcome, and this welcoming does not include any kind of restriction, any kind of pact, meaning unconditional hospitality does not in any way deals with or does not in any way draw our attention to a kind of a pact being made between the guest and the host. There is no pact. The guest is welcome. The guest can do whatever he or she likes, can stay, and can interact with the people belonging to the mainstream culture. But this does not mean that unconditional hospitality is something which is an ideal one, because unconditional hospitality, as Derrida says, is also subtly linked with conditionality, certain conditions. Like, obviously one is welcome, but at the same time, the laws of the land, these have to be obeyed. And obviously, there are other very important aspects related to behavior, cultural codes that the guest must understand and the guest must try to imbibe. So conditional hospitality and unconditional hospitality, in a sense, are interconnected. So the America that Mukherjee here presents is a kind of an America that encapsulates both conditional and unconditional hospitality. And the short story obviously makes us aware of this particular fact, makes us aware of the presence of both these aspects of hospitality. And there are other issues related to this particular distinction between conditional and unconditional hospitality, but which I shall not deal further, because that would complicate the entire discussion. But what I would like to point out is this, that the short story that you have in your syllabus, that is Jasmine, is a kind of a story which obviously has these two perspectives, the perspectives that I mentioned, unconditional hospitality and conditional hospitality. But at the same time, you need to keep in mind that here, Jasmine is a kind of a character, an illegal immigrant who tries to also, very importantly, erase this distinction between logos and xenos. Because if we clearly read the story, if we go through the story, then we see that there is a conscious desire in Jasmine, in this particular short story, to erase her identity as a foreigner. She is somebody who does not like to be addressed as a foreigner. She is somebody. In fact, when the story begins, at the very beginning of the story, Mukherjee informs us that this character Jasmine has traveled from Trinidad to Detroit. Detroit actually is one of the largest and the most populous city in the US state of Michigan. And Detroit also happens to be one of the largest US cities in the US-Canada border. So this character has traveled from Trinidad to Detroit, and she has managed to travel from Trinidad to Detroit via the Canada route. So first, she has migrated from Trinidad to Canada, and then from Canada to this particular place, which, as Mukherjee says, is Detroit. And quite interestingly, when the short story begins, you see that this particular character, that is Jasmine, crosses the US-Canada border in an empty mattress box. So as I said, that she is an illegal immigrant, and as an illegal immigrant, she, as we all know, in this case, she doesn't have the right papers, no certificate, nothing with her to prove that she has the necessary visa documents to come and stay in America. So obviously she is migrating to America illegally, and for that she has already taken the necessary help from somebody who actually stays in Detroit. And this particular family that stays in Detroit, this family has ensured that she would come to Detroit, stay at their place, and obviously they would manage all her boarding and lodging facilities, right? So she comes to Detroit and comes to Detroit and lives at a place which is owned by the Dabus, D-A-B-O-O-S, Dabus. Those of you who have read the short story, you might know that she comes to live with the Dabus, and these Dabus actually, very much like Jasmine, they too had migrated from Trinidad to America many years ago, and now they have settled in America, and they help people like Jasmine to come from Trinidad and engage themselves in different business activities or in doing different kinds of jobs in America. So basically, Dabus and people like Jasmine, they are living in this particular place, and they intend to become a part of the American culture, and they want to engage themselves in doing different kinds of activities in America and earn money. That is something which is important. So Dabus, they are very rich. They have been staying in America for a long time, and here, obviously, when she comes to live with the Dabus, then she realizes that America is a different country, very different from her from her actual home. So when she comes to America, the first impression that she gathers, or the first impression that she gets is this: that America is different, remarkably different from Trinidad. So she is somebody who has come from Port of Spain in Trinidad, and Port of Spain, as we all know, is one of the largest cities in Trinidad, and it's a part of the Caribbean islands. So that city in the island is remarkably different from this city, Detroit. And obviously, when she is here staying with the Dabus, she realizes that this is a different kind of a place. And herein, we can also see that how she is, in a sense, engaging with this aspect of unconditional hospitality. So here, the notion of hospitality is very much unconditional, because the Dabus, they provide her the necessary necessary boarding. There is a small room that is given to her with all the modern amenities. There is no restriction imposed on her, and she can work at work at a place where the Dabus work. She basically also does the cleaning and the other things in the house of the Dabus, and she's free to do other kinds of work in order to earn money. And when she obviously lives here, then she realizes that life here is quite different. She has a lot of freedom, and she obviously realizes that this culture is welcoming her. So her first experience is a kind of an experience which makes her feel that there is as such no restriction. And this is a case of unconditional hospitality. And as she works with the Dabus and does certain part-time jobs, and as she grows up, slowly she becomes very intimate with the daughters, with the daughters of daughters of Dabu, and these daughters, they have boyfriends, and one of these daughters one day, whose name is Loretta, she tells Jasmine that she must go to Ann Arbor. Now, Ann Arbor is a city located in the western part of Detroit, and it is also a kind of a city which is at the midwestern state of Michigan, US state of Michigan. So Ann Arbor is the place where she must go, and this idea is given to her by Loretta. So with Loretta, and there is another character, another daughter of Dabu, whose name is Viola. So with Viola and Loretta and with their boyfriends, she goes to Ann Arbor, and there at Ann Arbor, she realizes how grand is this American culture, because there are these girls along with their boyfriends, and there are other young couples over there. They enjoy, they drink, and they also dance. And there is also a reference to a reggae night. Now, reggae night in Arbor is basically a kind of a night where young couples, they dance, they drink, they have sex, and this culture, in a sense, appeals to Jasmine. She wants to become a part of this culture because this is so attractive to her, and this is so very enticing that Jasmine, as Mukherjee here, in this short story says, Jasmine is totally attracted to this entire culture of the reggae night, and reggae night, which becomes symbolic of the American freedom, the American life. And there at the reggae night, she dances, she drinks, but obviously she doesn't have any boyfriend. But she obviously feels that if at this point of time she had a boyfriend, then she could have also felt very happy, and she could have felt like Loretta and Viola are feeling at that point of time. So in this way, reggae night in a sense draws, or rather I would say attracts the attention of Jasmine to the American life, to the kind of American life that she has been dreaming for a very, very long time. And then obviously the next day when Viola and Loretta decide to go back to their home, you see that in the narrative, she doesn't decide, or she says directly to Loretta and Viola that she is not going back to the Dabus. She is going to stay at Ann Arbor and live the kind of life that America is going to offer here. So this is a kind of a uncertainty. She welcomes this uncertainty. She no more wants to become in a sense associated with the Dabus, or she rather wants to be dissociated with the Dabus and wants to embrace the true American culture all alone, and without obviously taking the help of the Dabus, because Dabus, as we all know, were instrumental in transporting her from Trinidad to or in a sense for assuring her immigration from Trinidad to America. So now she leaves the Dabu family and decides to stay at Ann Arbor, and there she comes in contact with the Moffitts. Now this Moffitts, the family of the Moffitts that stays in Ann Arbor, is a family consisting of 3 members: the husband Bill, a wife Lara, and they also have a daughter whose name is Muffin. And she becomes associated with this particular family, and this family hires Jasmine because the family is in need of a person who would take care of this particular small child whose name is Muffin. So while staying with the Moffitts, and obviously while looking after the daughter of Lara and Bill, she becomes very intimate with the family members. Now here, as you see, that there are certain very important aspects of hospitality that come to the foreground. And here, unlike the Dabus, the situation is not like, I would say, unconditional hospitality. Here, there is a kind of a conditional hospitality. She can stay with the Moffitts, but here, she has to stay at a room that is at the underground. That is the underground structure of the house. She cannot stay in the same floor with the Moffitts, and also she cannot come to the house of the Moffitts anytime when she likes. There is a work hour. She has to work from a particular time for a particular period of time during the day, and then when her work is over, she has to go back to that underground room which has been allotted to her. So here, when she is in the house of the Moffitts, and obviously Moffitts, as we all know, is an American family, she is obviously a kind of a guest who is being seen as a foreigner, as somebody who is a foreigner, and somebody who is being asked to comply with certain rules and regulations. So unlike the Dabus, you here find that she is very much experiencing certain very important aspects of conditional hospitality. But as the narrative progresses, and obviously now one interesting fact is this, that when she comes to this particular family for the first time, then Lara, the wife of Bill, she asks Jasmine her name, the place from where she comes, and all the other details. Now these details, which obviously are sought, or these details which are required, or these details which obviously Lara requires, these are important because, again, we need to go to Derrida. Derrida says that in the case of the xenos, a stranger, a foreigner, obviously one particular condition or one particular issue related to this hospitality is asking the name. Because naming and obviously other details helps create that binary, the guest-host binary, the logos and the xenos binary. So she is asked her name, and then the place, the place from where she has come, and all the other details by Lara. And then, quite interestingly, you find that she tells all these things, and then she obviously is employed to work as a servant in their family, and then she is provided all, as I said, all the necessary amenities to provide necessary assistance to their family. But as as Jasmine becomes quite intimate with this family of Moffats, one thing that becomes quite interesting is how Jasmine invents certain stories. While interacting with Lara and while interacting with Bill, and while she obviously gets any kind of scope for narrating her experience and such other things related to her life, she has this rare ability to invent stories. And there is one particular occasion when she actually discusses many aspects related to her indigenous culture. So while on one particular occasion when the Moffats, they dine with Jasmine, there's a dinner going on, and during that particular dinner, when Moffats discuss certain issues related to their life, then you see that Jasmine also discusses certain very important aspects related to the Trinidadian life, her past. And when she discusses these things, Lara is particularly attracted to Jasmine, because the way she narrates her past, this becomes quite interesting for Lara. And Lara, let me tell you, and those of you who have read the short story, Lara is actually a performing artist. She's not an actor working in films, but she's a performing artist, and she has she belongs to a particular group that performs in different parts of America. So she quite frequently goes away from her house and comes back after the performances are over. So she's a performing artist, and when she listens to these stories, which are not in a sense real stories, but stories that are invented by Jasmine just to draw the attention of these people to the kind of culture that she actually belongs to, and also in a sense to make these people feel a kind of an interest in her, so that she is not in a sense simply treated as an other. She continuously tries to make themselves feel that she's very much intimate with them, and if their culture is something which they are proud of, then obviously she also has a culture, but the kind of culture that she is narrating at times is not the real one. She invents stories about Trinidad. She invents stories about her migration from Trinidad to America, but she never tells that she's an illegal immigrant, and they also never question or they never ask her about her visa and all the other papers. So in this way, by telling different stories, by inventing different stories, she becomes quite intimate with them. And a time comes when Lara leaves her home and obviously tells Jasmine that now probably she won't come back before come back to her home before 3 months, because she would be out for 3 months performing in different parts of America with her group. And therefore she has to take care of the small child Muffin and obviously her husband also. Now it is during this absence of Lara that Jasmine slowly becomes a part of the family. Now slowly you find that, and this happens almost at the end of the narrative, she slowly tries to substitute the position of Lara in the family, because in the absence of Lara, she spends more time in the family. Bill also, in a sense, welcomes her, because Bill knows that, and Bill, as we come to know, and Bill, as Mukherjee tells in the narrative, is a professor. So he's a busy man, and he cannot give so much of time to to his own daughter. So obviously, in the absence of Laura, Jasmine spends a lot of time at Bill's house, and then at one point of time, one day, and this is where the narrative actually ends. One day, Jasmine starts thinking about Bill as a person, and Bill as somebody with whom he wants to become very close and very intimate, and somebody Jasmine even starts thinking about Bill as a possible boyfriend. And one night when Muffin is asleep, Jasmine goes to the house of Bill, from that underground house where she lives to the place where obviously Bill and her daughter and his daughter lives. And there he finds that Bill is almost drunk, and in that drunken state, Bill welcomes Jasmine, and says, or rather requests Jasmine to dance with him. Now this dancing is in a sense connected with that reggae night. At that reggae night, she had danced, but at that time there was no partner. But now there is somebody who is asking her to dance. So she obviously accepts this proposal. She starts dancing, and then quite interestingly, when the music is demanded. That means when Bill asks Jasmine that what kind of music he would play, then Jasmine obviously, and before Jasmine says anything, then Bill says that I don't have calypso. And calypso is a typical Trinidadian kind of music. So you find that Bill here is trying to otherize Jasmine as somebody who probably would like calypso. But quickly, as you find here, Jasmine says that no, she won't listen to calypso. She in fact takes out a disc from the album that they have, and in that disc obviously there is an English song, and if we focus on that section almost at the end of the narrative, the title of that disc is Music for Lovers. So it's an English album, and she requests Bill to play this music. So just mark that how she is trying to, in a sense, eradicate her identity as a Trinidadian and become a part of that American culture during this particular interaction with Bill. So Music for Lovers album is played, and then when this music is being played, they have sex. And with this particular love-making scene, the narrative ultimately comes to an end. And I would like to just read out the last part of the narrative, almost the last lines, which I believe is quite interesting, and which in a sense, as I was trying to point out at the beginning of my discussion, which in a sense eradicates this or seeks to eradicate this distinction between logos and xenos. Just mark, when that lovemaking is going on, the process of lovemaking is going on, Bill says, you are a blossom, a flower. You smell so good. You are really something, flower of Trinidad. Just mark, Bill is trying to trying to mark her as a foreigner, as a Trinidadian. So you are a flower, you are a blossom. That is what Bill is saying. So you are a flower of Trinidad. The response of Jasmine is quite interesting. She's not so keen on asserting this Trinidadian identity. She says, "Flower of Ann Arbor." This is the response of Jasmine. So she is not ready to accept this particular tag that she is a flower of Trinidad, flower of Ann Arbor, not Trinidad. And then Mukherjee explains, this is the last, obviously, the last two lines. She was thinking this as they made love on the Turkish carpet in front of the fire. She was a bright, pretty girl with no visa, no papers, and no birth certificate. No, nothing other than what she wanted to invent and tell. She was a girl rushing wildly into the future. His hand moved up her throat and forced her lips apart, and it felt so good, so right, that she forgot all the dreariness of her new life and gave herself up to it. So in a sense, this is how the story ends, in fact. So in a sense, we see that how this notion of, or this binary of logos and xenos is in a sense disrupted, or in a sense destroyed. And how this particular gaze of an American looking at a Trinidadian, that also is not, in a sense, accepted by this particular girl, that is Jasmine. She resists that. Don't call me a Trinidadian. I want to become a part of your culture. And it's no more your culture, it's a part of my culture. Right? And that's why she says that flower of Ann Arbor. Now, in this context, there is a particular philosophy, and I'd like to end my discussion by referring to this particular philosophy of Mukherjee, because many of you may feel that why this kind of a eroding of this particular distinction. And this philosophy is something which is at the background of Mukherjee's works. And this philosophy is very interesting because Mukherjee believes that she is somebody who, Mukherjee believes that as a writer, she is somebody who must be addressed as an American writer. She doesn't believe in that hyphenated Indo-American or Trinidadian American, and that kind of tag or that kind of hyphenated existence is not accepted by her. And that's why she constantly has been reiterating this particular fact that she is somebody who is a part of this large American culture, the large American structure, not somebody who must be looked at as an Indo-American writer, right? And this philosophy is at the background of all her writings. So when Jasmine is saying that one must not treat her as a Trinidadian flower, but consider as a flower of Ann Arbor, there is a strong resistance, but at the same time, a strong willpower working, and obviously willpower working to make her, or willpower working so that she becomes a part of this American culture. And that's why, she says, and I would like to, end my discussion by referring to this particular point that Mukherjee actually has stated in one of her interviews. She says, "I choose to describe myself as an American rather than an Asian American. Why it is that hyphenation is imposed only on non-white Americans? Rejecting hyphenation is my refusal to categorize the cultural landscape into a center and its peripheries. It is to demand that the American nation delivered the promises of its dream and its constitution to all citizens equally." So it is with this kind of a philosophy that she always tries to portray her characters. Now, I would like to end my discussion by pointing out that this is a typical pre-9/11 narrative. And that's why Mukherjee's philosophy is very much, in a sense, a kind of a positive philosophy where America as a logos is as if welcoming the Xenos. But obviously, in the post-9/11 era, this logos and the Xenos distinction has become very, very apparent, very, very clear. But looking at this, short story and looking at Mukherjee's philosophy, we can very well understand that why this particular girl, Jasmine, refuses to distinguish herself as somebody who is a Trinidadian at the end of the narrative, rather than becoming, refuses to distinguish herself as a Trinidadian, and rather asserts that it is important for her to become an American, not Trinidadian American, not a Caribbean American, but simply an American. So with this kind of philosophy is something which is very importantly related to the notion of hospitality, and how that this distinction between logos and xenos is in a sense eroded by this particular character that is Jasmine. So this is all about my analysis. I end my discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We all are kindled up with your beautiful deliberation. Now it's the time for interactions. And I would like to request Professor Arun Mondal, sir, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of English, Bankura Christian College, to conduct the interactive session. Please, sir.
Thank you, Abilal. Thank you, Dr. Ardok Kumarsina, my teacher. It was so nice to hear you after almost 10 long years as a student. And the floor is now open for interactions, questions, or any kind of observations. You can unmute yourselves and put the questions directly to Dr. Sinha, or you can post your questions in the chat box. I already find some questions in the chat box, sir. So can I read them to one after the other? Okay, sir.
Ayan, I can read the questions. Okay, no,
okay.
Not read it. Okay.
Sir,
I think the first question has been asked by Mukta. Mukta, are you there? Okay. The question I think is.
Yes, I'm here, Ananda.
Okay. Yes, Mukta, this question is quite important because in the novel, as you said, and you have correctly said, in the novel, this protagonist actually changes her name. First she is Jyoti, and then Jasmine, then Zaz. Then this is a kind of a practice, as I was trying to point out in the first part of my lecture, that these characters who belong to the liminal zone, in order to become a part of the larger American structure, they undergo through a kind of a process which enable them to become a part of the larger American structure. And one very important aspect is this very aspect of Americanizing themselves. So look at the transformation from Jyoti to Jasmine, and then to Zaz and Jane and Jess. All these names indicate that she is slowly, in a sense, derooting herself, and also at the same time rerooting in America. So the last name Zess obviously indicates that she is very much like this particular character in the short story Jasmine, asserting her American identity, and at the same time obviously disconnecting herself from the so-called the Indian roots. This fluidity, or this, I won't say it's fluidity, but this transformation, this aspect of self-transformation is very much required, and this is a part of, I would say, assimilation dynamics. So when a character assimilates another culture, this kind of process is quite normal and quite natural. So that is how I would like to respond to your question.
Thank you, Ananda.
Yes. The next question has been asked by Pooja. Pooja, I think, Pooja, are you audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Pooja.
Yes, sir.
So,
thank you, sir. I think that you already answered the second part of my question.
Yes, I have answered the second part of your question. And yes, symbol of freedom. Yes, that is one way of looking at America, because America in both the novel, Jasmine, and this particular short story is symbolic of freedom. It in a sense, and the dance, the very aspect of dance symbolizes a sense of freedom, and this I think is a very important aspect, because when she is dancing, I actually didn't get the scope to examine in detail that last portion, because when she's dancing, she also, in a sense, takes off her clothes. So taking off the clothes also indicates that how her body is becoming free, and how her body is, in a sense, mingling with an American body. And this mingling is important because she's enjoying this mingling. She's not considering this as a kind of a threat to her identity or something like that. When she touches the mouth of Bill, touches the body of Bill, she is enjoying this touch. So in a sense, dance, and along with dance, taking off her clothes, and obviously the naked body, or naked bodies, I would say, indicate that she is, in a sense, becoming a part of this culture which is promoting freedom, absolute freedom. So that is how I'd like to, look at your question. Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, there is a question by one of our former students, Matralina Poti. Can I ask?
Let me just.
Okay.
Yes, Sean. Yes.
The text narrates that the essential Trinidadian reggae music helped to revitalize Jasmine on her first night in Ann Arbor. It reminds her of her vitality. The memory of home, it seems, boosts her in her attempt to deroot and enroot her. It would be extremely helpful, sir, if you shed light on this particular aspect. Sir.
Actually, when the reggae night is arranged there, you see that two kinds of music are being played. One, obviously, American music, and then obviously at one point of time the American music is switched off, and then the Trinidadian music is also played. So you find that at that point of time, she's still in that initial stage where she is very strongly connected with her indigenous roots. She is, at that particular stage where she is preparing herself to become a part of the larger American structure. So that obviously is a kind of that obviously is a very interesting phase in her life, where she is trying to, in a sense, remove all the inhibitions, remove all the past kind of attachments, and become a part of the American culture. In fact, I would say that reggae night, is a crucial juncture in her life, because had she not come to attend this reggae night, she would not have stayed at Ann Arbor, and she would not then have also not come in contact with the Moffats, because here, after the reggae night, the very next day, when the Dabu daughters, they go back to their home, she decides not to join them. So that is a crucial decision which she takes after the reggae night, because she realizes that this freedom that the reggae night has allowed her to get, this is invaluable. This she cannot let go, and that's why she decides to stay at Ann Arbor and lead a life of complete freedom. And obviously, at the end of the narrative, she gets that freedom. So that reggae night is therefore a very crucial kind of, I would say, dance performance, a crucial kind of point in the entire narrative.
Thank you, sir. There are two more questions. One is by Tejjita Guho. Sir, would you please shed light on the aspects of dance and music in the process of identity formation?
Debjita actually is an MPhil student of mine, and she is working on this aspect of music, but not on this particular text, but other texts. Yes, Debjita, music plays a very vital role, because music, in a sense, also can be interpreted as a kind of a form which also orchestrates. Orchestrates means music also is a kind of a thing that lends this kind of feeling in Jasmine, lends this kind of feeling to Jasmine that she must become a part of this particular American culture. It enables her to feel that she is in some way connected to America. In fact, in the last part of the narrative, when this album is being played, Music for Lovers, that music helps her to enjoy the sex. So music in a way is connected to her life, and music in a sense liberates her from all the so-called the past kind of attachments, and helps her to look at the future, to proceed to the future.
Thank you, sir. And this is the last question, very basic one, asked by one of our students, PG students. Bharati Mukherjee likes to categorize herself as an American writer. Why don't we find Americans as the protagonists of our novels or short stories?
Yes, it's a very basic question, Arun. Why? Actually, I think because she is somebody who herself has migrated from, or she in fact did migrate from India to America, and therefore in most of her interviews, if you go through her interviews, you would find that she constantly has mentioned that she is interested in portraying those characters who, very much like her, have traveled from the so-called the Asian locations or the Asian countries to America. So she is rather, as a writer, interested in capturing this immigrant experience, and that's why in her novels Americans are there, but obviously at the periphery, because she wants to, in a sense, give a lot of emphasis on the experiences of the immigrants coming from South Asia, immigrants coming from the Caribbean locations and the other parts of the world.
Thank you, sir. On a personal note, Shoikotta heard every bit of your lecture, and he has posted here, lovely to hear you, Orno. Give my best to Gargi and your little angel.
Oh, thank you, Shoikotta.
Okay, over to our student Abilal. No, sorry, over to Taposh. Taposh, are you there? Taposh Das, Faculty Department of English. Taposh?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
You are audible, Taposh. Please go ahead.
Our sincere thanks to respected Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha sir for such well-organized, impressive, and third eye-opening lecture. We are grateful enough to you, sir, for your academic cooperation and gracing all of us with your amazing lecture that enhanced our appetite for learning further. Thank you very much, sir. Now, may I request? Thank you, sir. Now, may I request our student Abilal to formally proceed towards the second session. Over to you, Abilal.
Thank you so much. The next speaker of our today's session is Professor Nivedita Mukherjee ma'am, Professor of English, Sidhu Kanhu Desai University. Ma'am is so sweet in herself that I feel lucky every time when I get a chance to listen to ma'am. And I should stop here, and I should rather request AYM sir, Professor AYM sir, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of English, Bankura Christian College, to introduce Professor Nivedita Mukherjee ma'am formally. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Abilal, again for giving me the chance of introducing my teacher. Dr. Nivedita Mukherjee is Professor of English at Sidhu Kanhu Desai University, Purulia. She specializes in feminist studies, Indian English literature, and Shakespearean drama. Professor Mukherjee has 5 edited books to her credit: Gendering the Narrative, Gender Discourse in Indian English Fiction, that came in 2015, Dynamics of Diasporic Identity in Commonwealth Literature, 2013, The Dark Forces in Shakespeare's Plays, 2013, among others. Professor Mukherjee also has international teaching experience. She taught for a brief span at Seattle University, USA. She has served as the editor of 2 reputed journals of Bankura Christian College, namely Wesleyan Journal of Research and International Journal, and Appropriations Journal of the Department of English, Bankura Christian College. She has received the USA State Fellowship Award, SUSI. She is working with Teaching Learning Center, IIT Kharagpur, as research collaborator and subject expert in a project titled Graphic Novel Based Pedagogy in Teaching Grammar in Schools, funded by MHRD. Presently, she is also working on an ICSSR funded project. Before joining Shidukanu Visha University, and we are proud to announce it, Professor Mukherjee served a long stint at Bankura Christian College, and the college feels proud and honored to host you, Madam, once again. Over to my teacher, Professor Nivedita Mukherjee. Madam, please.
Yes. This was really beautiful and at the same time agonizing, because this institution is home for me. As I was going through all the people who have assembled here, the students, the names, each name has a kind of memory. Oyon himself, still now we are constantly in touch, and whenever there is some problem, I kind of turn back to him for help. And obviously, though he is my student in a way, he is pride of this department. I felt this when I was in this department, and now when I am speaking to my department as a part of another department, though at the same time being in this department. Well, coming to the some of the difficulties that I am facing at present is actually related to the internet connectivity. So from time to time, I may be turning the video off, because that will give me more time to be with you. Okay, so today I will be talking to my students, and when Oyon invited me, he again invited. That kind of it feels a bit different. So he said, ma'am, speak about something that is related to the students and to their syllabus. So today's lecture, more than a lecture, is a classroom talk for me, and it is directed to my students who always were extremely lively in the classroom. And I must say, wherever I go, I will be missing this classroom or these classrooms. So today I will be talking about a text which y'all must have read, though there may or may not be exam soon. So Draupadi by Mahashweta Devi, but as I come to it, I will be talking also about another text that is equally important, though not a part of your syllabus, but kind of helps us to arrive at the beginning of Draupadi. So, beginning with Mahashweta Devi, she was a writer per excellence, but that does not need to be said. But at the same time, she was more than a writer. What I wish to say, her social activism actually changed the scenario for the tribals in not just Bengal, but the entire area, which now is famous or ill-famous as the Jungle Mahal area. It comprises areas of Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, and Orissa. And Mahashweta Devi, she roamed these places and she collected material. She said that for her writing, she was as much indebted to oral narratives as to history. History is a way of looking back at those oral narratives, and also the myths that abound in this area, and the myths that are passed on as a part of our cultural heritage. So as I talk about it, I will like to speak at first about one of the initial works that Mahashweta Devi actually one of the works that Mahashweta Devi introduced as part of the tribal, you can say, the psychological realm. It deals with Birsa Munda, of course, that great tribal hero who was almost clinically murdered under the British in the prison in Jharkhand, in prison in Ranchi. And this text, known as Aronner Odhikar, speaks about the rights for the forest. Again, a dilemma, because whose right? It is, in one sense, it is the right of the tribal people to the forest, and another sense, it is the right of the forest to live in its entirety without being disturbed by outsiders. Mahashweta Devi herself said that I am also an outsider. We should let these tribals live as they would live. So when she came in contact with these tribals, she was appalled by the situation over there. Rice was a luxury for these tribals. They usually lived on a kind of concoction prepared from wild grass. They could not afford to have rice. So Birsa Munda and the number of revolts that went after this, which led to the British government to redesign its policy towards the tribals, was a happening that greatly influenced Mahashweta Devi. She was also interested in the categorization of these tribals as denotified tribes. In my work, during my work, I came in touch with Professor Ganesh Devi of Chotro, and there he works for the Chara community, and it was there that I had the good fortune of once meeting Mahashweta Devi. And she asked me some questions, which I today will be asking my dear students as I speak of the text that we spoke about. All right. Now, before I come to that, I just want to give you an idea of the kind of criminality that still persists in the name of power, in the name of government, in the name of agency. Now, who were these denotified tribes? Actually, there was an act passed by the British in 1871, which was known as the Criminal Tribal Act. And according to this act, certain tribes were classified as criminals. That means whatever they did, even if they didn't do anything, they could be arrested, and it was unbailable offense. Though in 1952 an act was passed by the government of India denotifying these tribes, yet the next series of orders that went after this, such as the Habitual Offenders Act, that means by birth, these members of these tribal groups, they are prone to commit crimes. That means if a theft occurs in an area, they can easily arrest one of these tribals and keep him in the prison for days without any hearing in the court or things like that. And such an event happened. Budhon Shobor, he was actually moving from one part of Purulia to another with his wife on the cycle when he was suddenly arrested by the police and he was brutally tortured in the prison and he died. This was something that strongly agonized Mahashweta Devi. And she started moving the High Court. She even went to the Supreme Court for the rights of these people. And it was in 2014 that a ruling came that the family of Budhan was supposed to be paid 1 lakh rupees as compensation. Of course, students and my friends, 1 lakh is a very, very minimal amount compared to the agony. It can never be the price of a person's life, but it was something, a token that the government accepts. A section of the government is forced to accept that these people, just because they are tribals, or they belong to that, or they belong to that criminal category of tribes, they were notified as criminals, that did not make them easy prey in any way. People had to be careful. So this, you'll get an idea of the different agonies which these people felt in the, we can say, this Jungle Mahal area. This was one aspect. Another aspect was bonded labor. We may think we live in a free country. We are very proud of our freedom, our nationalism, all these things. But just think for once, how free is a country when there still exists this concept of bonded labor? Mahashweta Devi wrote a short story, Ajir, which was later dramatized. It was translated into English, as most of her works were. Gayatri Chakrabarty's Spivak says, strangely enough, out of 4 million people, Bengali-speaking people all over the world, only 25% are Bengali literate. So that means that most of the people, even the Bengalis, like the other Indians and other nationalities, they read Mahashweta Devi in translation. Here, translation becomes very important in studying Mahashweta Devi. Now, next, what I come to is the concept of gender. You know, gender itself is, especially the females in Indian society, undergo a lot of agony. People do say that they are now free, or we hear men say, we have granted freedom to our women. Mark the word, granted freedom, as if women need to be granted freedom. They are not free right from the beginning of it. So, when we come to this, Mahashweta Devi, she pointed out how the female belonging to these tribal societies and some of the Dalits who live in and around this area, Mahashweta Devi was very categorical in not calling the tribals as Dalits. All right, she differentiated them. So, when we come to this, the women of these groups, they were kind of doubly marginalized. Marginalized once because they belong to these subaltern societies, and secondly, marginalized because they are women belonging to these societies. But was the situation any better for women in India who belong to the highest echelon of society? For instance, what is the situation with the mythical princesses? Were they happy? What was their life like? Mahashweta Devi had an immense love for the myths, but she rewrote the myths from the perspective of women, and often her area of interest, not just often, mostly her area of interest was marginal women in the epics who have been spoken about or who haven't been spoken about. So here we come to not just the class caste binary, but class, caste, and gender. These, when coupled together, created immense problems. So, as I talk about these, I will be talking about the text, a small text, which is actually a collection of 3 short stories by Mahashweta Devi. Its English translation is known as After Kurukshetra. All right. Mahabharata as an epic is not just an epic. It has a different agency of its own, which I will be talking about, which the Ramayana does not really have. It is a battle for land. All right. The battle of Kurukshetra. What was it? It is known as Dharma Yudh. But what is Dharma? What is this youth about? Mahashweta Devi, she keeps on asking these questions. So, we are usually concerned, the readers by and large who have read the myths, in fact, most of us watched it on television, all right, and during the lockdown phase, some of my students who might not have been born when the first Mahabharata was telecast, all right, so that was again repeated in the lockdown period, and I know of some people who have been watching this, so I will say this is a positive impact of the lockdown. But if we are mainly concerned with the battle and the establishment of the Pandava rule in Hastinapur. But after that, what happens after that? How did the people, mostly the women, how did they actually live after Kurukshetra? That is what Mahashweta Devi asks. And her first question is that what is so great about the Great War if it results in so much agony, in so much pain and differentiation? She uses 2 terms, Rajbritta and Janabritta or Lokbritta. That means one that comprises of the royal family and the people who are directly related to the royal family, and the other, the people outside, the other, all right, people who live in the margin of the society. What was their situation actually in and after the battle? This book, as I told you, it consists of 3 short stories. One is, the first story is The 5 Widows. In this story, Mahashweta Devi, here, she mixes myth and fiction. She is mixing together epic with fiction. So, there is an imaginary situation where Uttara, you all know, Uttara was actually the widow of Abhimanyu and was going to be, and after the Kurukshetra battle, when it ended, she was with child. So obviously, and everyone expected as usual it would be a male child. It had to be the male child because that was the only hope of the Pandavas. All right. And if you read the Mahabharata, you know what has been done and what not has been done in the name of having an heir to the throne. So Uttara was sad, a widow, lonely after the battle. Almost everyone has passed away. She has no company as such. So it was decided in the story. I don't know whether it really happened in the Mahabharata, because I did not find this anywhere. She was lonely, and to do away with her loneliness, 5 widows of the foot soldiers were invited to the palace to give her company. And this dialogue between the 5 widows who actually belonged to the foot, they were the wives of the foot soldiers, they lived in the margin of the society, nobody speaks of them in the battle of Mahabharata, nobody cares about them in the battle of Mahabharata. So these women speak to Uttara, and this discussion is extremely important. Equally important is the next story, which is titled Kunti and the Nishadin. After the battle of Mahabharata, when the Pandavas took the throne, or they were in power in Hastinapur, this Dhritarashtra, the blind king, along with his wife Gandhari and his brother's wife Kunti, they went for Banaprastha. These are the 4 actually, the cycles of the life according to Hindu religion, which a true Hindu must undertake. So the 3rd cycle is they have to go for Banaprastha. So they left the palace and they went to the forest, and in the forest, this is again fiction, we consider this, Kunti comes across a Nishadin. Who is this Nishadin? She is the mother of the 5 Nishads who were killed in the Lakshagriha. You all remember, those of you who have read the Mahabharata, that actually 5 burnt out bodies were found in the Lakshagriha after the burning down of that house, and the Kauravas took it that the Pandavas had perished in the terrible fire. But it was actually 5 innocent, marginalized men, 5 Nishads, sons of this woman, who now questions Kunti. What did you get? You had my sons killed, or your sons had my sons killed. What did you get because of this? Did you get anything really? But the most interesting text, and which I will be talking about, is the story of a Dasi who is, kind of thrown out of the Rajbrita. She's brought into the Rajbrita to perform certain duties and then unceremoniously thrown out of the Rajbrita. But she is not vanquished. She rises a conqueror beyond all this. And this is the story of Sobhali. Sobhali is in fact the name given by Kunti. This character does exist in the Mahabharata, but she is unnamed. Her name doesn't matter. A Dasi is not supposed to have an identity. Her only job is to serve the master, to please the master. And Sobhali was brought in to please Dhritarashtra. All right, perform all the duties which a wife is supposed to perform, because Gandhari at that stage was incapable of performing those duties as she was with child. So Sobhali, she undertook her duties. As a result of these duties, she gave birth to a son. But once the purpose was fulfilled, she and her son, they were thrown out of the palace. Everyone knew about the existence of this boy who in Mahabharata is called Jujutsu. All right. But whom Mahashweta Devi calls Sovalya, from Shobhali. Here again, Mahashweta Devi is breaking tradition. She's naming a boy after his mother because it is the mother who brought up the boy. The father was very much aware of the existence of Jujutsu or Sobhalya, but what does it matter to him? He was allowed to come into the royal palace, entered the Rajbrita again, but only as a servant of his step brothers. So Sobhalya, he was the only Kaurav because he was a son of Dhritarashtra. We call him the Kaurav, and according to the Mahabharata, he was the only Kaurav who fought the battle on behalf of the Pandavas. And he was the only Kaurav who survived this terrible battle. All right. But then there is the forest fire, and Dhritarashtra, Kunti and Gandhari all perish in the forest fire. And now Sobhalya is called upon. The story begins from here. Sobhalya has been called upon to perform the last rites which a son is supposed to perform upon the death of the father. But Sobhalya, he questions. He has certain questions in his mind. And with these questions, he goes to his mother. All right. He goes to his mother and he asks her, should I perform actually the rites of the son? I was never given the status of a son. All right. And over here, Mahashweta Devi begins the text by describing the outskirts of, or the area of, this area at the outskirt of Hastinapur where the marginals live. I quote, on the margins of the town live the marginalized. Their settlement is a lively, noisy place. Look at the use of the words, lively, full of life. And after Kurukshetra, this is after Kurukshetra. If there is any life, the life is in the area lived by or inhabited by these marginalized people. There is no life in the royal palace. There is only sorrow. That is why Mahashweta Devi asked, what is so great about the Great War that brings about so much unending sorrow? So she says, the alleys are narrow, the house is small, cattle shed beside the huts. This is, a common, very common, you can say, habitat of the local people, which we usually find when we go to the periphery of the towns or beyond. Now, Sobhali also is asked to perform some duties because she was never called the wife of Dhritarashtra, but she is asked now upon his death. Everyone had forgotten about her. Now upon his death, because there is no living wife of Dhritarashtra to perform the last rites, she is asked to perform those rites, to wear the white robe that is considered appropriate for the widow. To cut her hair, a widow was supposed to do away with any kind of dressing or adornment. She was to eat meager food, all right, lead a very harsh life. All this meant for a woman who loses her husband. And here I quote, Sobhali is saying, I'm just a dasi. Was I his wedded wife that I should undergo the death rites? In the royal household, so many of us dasis come and go. So many of us have children. But what? We don't belong to the royal household. She is therefore not ready to give up anything that actually she's not ready to give up anything that a widow is supposed to give up. She says questions which actually all widows should be asking. Society cannot ask you to stop eating. Society cannot do that. Society cannot ask you or cannot set the norms of your dressing. That is for you to decide. So she says, I will feast on sweet kheer, laddus, ghee, rich jowar pithas, golden honey. And after I am full, I will sleep peacefully, holding my son in my arms. That is all that matters to her. She never had a husband. All right. She never was considered a wife. She only had her boy. So that is all that matters to me. I don't care who died where. And her defiance is straight and open. She confronts and she conquers. So she says her last words, I will let my own dharma tell me what is right. Very interesting presentation of the agency of dharma. What is dharma? This text where a marginalized woman who was a dasi, who had no place in society whatsoever, questions the concept of dharma, which actually lies at the root of the entire battle of Mahabharata. As I told you, it was actually a battle for dharma, for establishment of dharma. Now I come to the second text, and here I will be talking in detail about the agency of Mahabharata as a text, all right, a text brought to India by the Aryans. All right, the Aryans were not the original inhabitants of India. In fact, the tribals, the Adivasis, original inhabitants, predate all these Aryans. So they had to establish their rule upon this geographical territory which was called India. And as a means of establishment, literature, especially religious literature, has always been used as a means of establishing rule. It is a tool used by the powers of society. In my class, I used to talk, as most of you are my students, I used to talk about the New Testament of the Bible and how it was actually compiled, not in the time of Jesus Christ, but almost 800 years later, during the rule of Constantine. Emperor Constantine wanted to bring all the European nations together, and what better way to do that than have a common religion, have a common God. And so Christ, it was, a very careful selection of texts which actually showed Christ as the Son of God. Those books, the Bible, you all know, the New Testament comprises of books. Those books which actually spoke of Christ as a mortal, those were not given a place in the New Testament. This is actually an aspect of religious domination which the powers always use. So now Draupadi, this text actually was a part again of a collection of loosely connected political narratives known as Agni Garbha. All right. And the name is, it's called something to the mind. What does it call to our mind? If we think of that, actually, who was Draupadi? She was born out of fire. All right. She was born out of fire in order to quench the desire for revenge of her father, or so-called father, King Draupadi, Jogagni Shambhutanadi. All right, born out of fire. There is a very famous book, Yagya Seni, by Pratibha Ray. She is a Oriya novelist. It has been translated into English and it is extremely popular and well read. Okay, so Mahashweta Devi, she has been called, when I come to this text, Draupadi, she has been called, actually this text was translated into English by another great name, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. And Spivak, she calls Mahashweta Devi an experimentalist. She was an experimentalist because her prose was an amalgamation of literary Bengali, bureaucratic Bengali, tribal Bengali. Strange amalgamation. All right. All these were actually the situation. So now when we come to this translation, and I told you translation is very important when we read Mahashweta Devi. And what is the backdrop of this text? The backdrop is the Naxalite movement. This is a movement which, it resulted in a number of texts. Purbo Poshchim, if you all have read. It is based as the backdrop, it has this. So the Naxalite movement, which originated in Naxalbari near Shiliguri, and it was fought for quite a time, 1967 to 71. The Bangladesh Liberation War, 1971. And as a backdrop, with all these as a backdrop, we have the Operation Bakuli, which is directly referred to by Mahashweta Devi. All right. What was Operation Bakuli? It was actually an uprising by the tribals who lived in the area of Jharkhani, and these tribals, they did not have a right to water. Water, the basic necessity of life. I began by talking about rice. That is faraway dream. Water, man, humans cannot survive without water. But the wells, they belong to the upper caste. And as you all know, these Dalits and the tribals, they in fact do not have an existence within the four Varna system of Hinduism. They have often been called the Panchama. All right, some people who are beyond actually this, beyond, they exist beyond this four Varna system. So government, these people, they rose and there was a revolt, a localized revolt, and some landowners were killed and the wells were usurped. And how did the government react? The government, after all, is a part of the upper echelon of society, and they reacted with coercion in the form of kidnapping, murder, rape to subjugate these rebels. Now, this text, it actually begins with the readers being introduced to this name, Draupadi and Dopti. Draupadi is a Sanskrit name. So obviously these lower caste people, they do not have any right to a Sanskrit name. And this is said, this is told that Draupadi was in fact given the name by the wife of the landlord Shurjashahu, under whom her father worked. It is a kind of benevolence, throwing away of arms. We do that. All right. We have plenty. I can give you a little of that. But this term is not this word in the, you can say, in the tribal dialect, it has become Dopti. It is no longer Draupadi. So the central character of our text, Draupadi, the text is named Draupadi, is a tribal girl named Dopti. All right. Now, again, I come back to the agency of the Mahabharata and the presentation of Draupadi therein. We will see the patriarchal agency very much present over here. Now, what was the Mahabharata? Mahabharata, as I told you, was an epic with an agenda. It was a battle for land. All right, and the Aryans were coming into India. They had invaded India. That was another battle for land. And when one battle, we are being told the story, it is being interwoven into the cultural memory of the conquered nation through the epic, that this battle for land is a dharma yuddha. Now, what is dharma? I had referred to this. Shobhali speaks of her own dharma. Over here, again we come to the name, to the word dharma. It is, as per, if I go to the Old English Dictionary, a cosmic law underlying the right way of life. Again, right. These terms, right, wrong, good, bad, these are, as I always said in my classes, these are always comparative terms. My concept of right may not be your concept of right, but a right concept is always established through, as I told you, in the time of Emperor Constantine, through religion, through created gods, and now we have this kind of the text which speaks of the right, what is right. But all that happens in the Mahabharata, this is what Mahashweta Devi in fact told me. Was it right? Was it right? All that happens in the name of the battle, was it rape? And regarding Draupadi, she said, there was no rape, but there was rape. All right. So now, when we come to this, Draupadi was actually, she was a singular woman in Mahabharata. Why? Because she had a number of husbands, polyandry. unthought of for women in those days, still unthought of, but in those days it was completely unthought of, polyandry, all right. So, but polyandry, a woman who practices this, a woman who has a number of husbands, there again, this attacks a concept which lies at the very root of the Hindu system of marriage. That is, and not just Hindu system, I will say in many religions throughout the world, I have seen this. That is the concept of virginity. A woman is supposed to be a virgin when she gets married. But how could Draupadi, the thing was, the agreement was that Draupadi will live with one brother for 1 year. In the course of that, she may even have a son. She did have 5 sons from 5 brothers. In the course of that period, she may even have a son. But when she goes to the next brother at the end of the first year, the beginning of the second year, she still remains a virgin. It is said that this was a special boon by Lord Shiva, who actually rules the cosmos according to Hindu cosmology, if we say. So Lord Shiva had granted Draupadi this boon that she would be a virgin every time she enters the room of another, the chamber of another husband. Now there is a lot is written about this concept of virginity. It has been challenged by feminists. Excuse me, I think something. Okay, that is something I'm not very, learning new things in the process. So we have to think over here a little about this concept of virginity. And Nayonika Mukherjee, she's a professor of anthropology of Durham University, and she has a very important work known as The Spectral Wound, Sexual Violence, Public Memories and the Bangladesh War of 1971. And I quote Nayonika Mukherjee, men feel as if they have been emasculated when they lose their sole physical access to their partner. All right. Actually, Nayonika Mukherjee was here talking about the Birangona women. This actually was a play which was performed by Komala Collective, a team led by Lisa Ghazi, and it deals with the women who were raped, in many cases gang raped during the Bangladesh liberation movement, but who survived and who had the courage to speak of these experiences. So history again and again has brought us face to face to such situations. Rape does happen as a part of power politics. But in Mahabharata, it almost happens, but it does not happen. How? Again, through the male agency of Lord Krishna, who kind of provides Draupadi with an endless clothing. All right, that does not allow her to become naked in front of the men. But does this really happen? Does this happen in reality? This is the question which Mahashweta Devi said she kept on asking herself. So if this does not happen, how does women or women for that sense, because it happens in plurals, so how do they counter such a situation? The result was this text, Dopti. All right. And here, as I talk of Dopti, I will be again telling you all about a real life incident which some of you must be knowing. An incident that happened in Manipur. Actually, a young girl known as Thangjam Manorama, she was raped by the paramilitary forces and she was murdered. She was gang raped multiple times, tortured, and then she was killed. But what happened? And the court said that we cannot give out any punishment because there was a special military law known as the AFSPA law of 1958, which gave immunity to these soldiers. So 5 days later, after this, what happens? Around 30 middle-aged women, they walked naked from Imphal to the army headquarters in the outskirts, crying, Indian army rape us too. We are all Manorama's mothers. So what Mahashweta Devi presents in a story is not just a story. It happens in reality. Because you know, the female body has been the site of exploitation through the ages. There are multiple theories related to this. But today I promised myself that I won't be going into any kind of jargons or any kind of text. As most of you are my students, you can call me up or somehow you can connect to me and I will give you the text if you are interested in reading. So this female body, the shame that women are imbibed with, the shame that we are imbibed with right from her birth. You know, it is created, if you all remember, the gender category by Judith Butler. All right. Judith Butler, she also wrote about a text known as Bodies That Matter. Actually, she was speaking about the female body. All these texts are over there. So, this nudity, here Mahashweta Devi uses it as a kind of power. So who is Dept? When the story begins, she is a simple tribal girl whom situation turns into a revolutionary. I will be quoting from the text. I will be quoting from the text over here. If we come to this, that was the troubled time. Dopti is confused when she thinks about it. Operation Bakuli in Bakuli. Shurja Shahu arranged with Biri Babu to dig 2 tube wells and 3 wells within the compound of his own house. No water anywhere. Drought in Birbhum. Unlimited water at Shurja Shahu's house, as clear as the crow's eyes. No water, just for a drop of water. The people were fighting for this drop of water, and this led to a revolt, and it resulted in the murder of Shurja Shahu and his son. And as a result, of course, the military came, it killed almost everyone except Dulna Maji and Dopti Meji. Dopti was the wife of Dulna, and she, like all girls, was in love with Dulna. All right, she always felt that Dulna was a part of her. Okay, so just a minute, I want to quote from here actually. So, Dopti loved Dulna more than her blood. No doubt it is she who was serving the fugitives. So what Dopti, as I told you, was an ordinary woman, a wife who loved her husband, and the very fact she did not ever dream of becoming a revolutionary. This was what she did because Dulna told her to do. Up to this point, it is again patriarchal agency which is operative as Dulna. So they could not have reached Poltakuri after Bakuli. Bhupati and Topa took them. These names, Bhupati, Topa, Oriji, these names are urban names. These show, actually this shows the urban influence behind this upsurges that was taking place in all these areas in the Jharkhand belt, including the Operation Bakuli. All right. So then it was decided that Dopti and Dulna would work around the Jharkhandi belt. Dulna had explained to Dopti. So Dulna told Dopti, dear, this is best. We won't get family and children this way. But who knows? Landowners and moneylenders and policemen might one day be wiped out. So what does this tell us? This tells us that Dopti in reality had very ordinary aspirations. She was happy as a mother, though they lived in very, difficult situation, and she wanted to be a mother someday. She was happy as a wife, wanted to be a mother. But the man she loved told her, this is not the way of life. They had to take a different way of life. All right. So she took that life, and that is what brought her to or in front of the Sena Naik. The Sena Naik again has a lot of different, it has been, the character of the Sena Naik has been studied from different perspectives. Gayatri Chakravarti refers to the Sena Naik as a representative of the Western scholar, the psyche of the Western scholar. But here we will look upon the Sena Naik as the representative of the power that decides what will be done and won't be done. So Draupadi Mechen was apprehended at 6:53 p.m. They were, the police were kind of ransacking villages. Anyone with black skin was being shot at. Numerous people were raped and murdered during this phase, just in the name of finding the fugitives, Dulna and Dopti. Dulna dies in this, and then Dopti was fighting alone. She was moving from village to village, talking to the people about the wrongs that are being done. She was being used till then. She was working under a male agency. The voice of origin keeps on playing in her mind. That if you are apprehended, if you are caught by the police, please don't talk. All right, bite off your tongue if necessary, but don't talk. So Draupadi Mechen was apprehended at 6:53 p.m. It took an hour to get her to the camp. Questioning took another hour exactly. No one touched her, and she was allowed to sit on a canvas camp stool. At 8:57, Sena Naik's dinner hour approached, and he said, make her do the needful. And he disappeared. The strange combination between the order and the concept of dinner time. He is going to have his dinner. And what is his order? A woman has to be made How can she be made? Make her, mark the term used by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak in her translation. This term is as powerful as the original term used by Mahashweta Devi. In fact, I find this term even more powerful than the term used by Devi. So what happens over here? A man is going to have his dinner, and what has he ordered? He has ordered gang rape of an innocent woman. Again, may not be innocent in the eyes of the police or the powers, but an innocent girl. She has been ordered, she's not much old. She has been ordered to be gang raped. And after the first round of gang rape, one after another, the men came, taking advantage of her situation. She lay down, spray eagle with her two hands tied on two sides, her feet tied on two clamps. She can do nothing, and one after another, the men attack her. Still, till then, she had hope. Hope is, hope is something that never dies, does not allow you to die at all. So, after the first round, for a moment, Draupadi had lost, she had become unconscious. She had lost all kind of, her memory of place, time, and what was happening to her. Slowly, she came back to herself, and she turns her eyes and sees something white. In a distance, she sees her cloth. All right, nothing else. Suddenly, she hopes against hope. Perhaps they had abandoned her. All right, perhaps they had left her for the foxes to devour. Even being devoured by the foxes is much better, 100 times better than being raped. And nature, how does it react to this? The moon vomits a bit of light and goes to sleep. Only the dark remains. All right, a compelled spread eagle still body. Active pistons of flesh rise and fall over it. But now, how does Draupadi fight back? In the morning, what was done at night, that must be hidden. So they give her a pot of water to wash herself, and they tell her to clothe herself. This is where the trouble begins. Draupadi says, I won't be clothed. Why? Because why do I need to clothe? Over here, every man has seen me nude. All right, you can unclothe me, but can you clothe me? And Draupadi's black body comes even closer. Draupadi shakes with an indomitable laughter that Senanaik simply cannot understand. Her ravaged lips bleed as she begins laughing. Draupadi wipes the blood on her palm and says in a voice that is terrifying, sky splitting and sharp as her ululation, what is the use of clothes? You can strip me, but how can you clothe me again? And for once, the Senanayak is afraid to stand before the unarmed target, terribly afraid. The text ends here, and I would like to end with some lines that I took in the title of my paper and lines I find extremely similar. Lines written by Sylvia Plath in Lady Lazarus. Beware, beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. Thank you.
Hello,
you, ma'am.
Abdullah. Yes.
Yes, please. I think you all would agree with me, and it would not be any exaggeration if I say that ma'am has the gifted quality to simplify hard to understand text. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your enchanting deliberation. Now it's the time for interaction. And I would like to request Professor Arun Mandor, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of English, Bankura Christian College, to conduct the interactive session. Please, sir.
Thank you, madam, for that extremely interesting lecture. You can find in the chat box how our students have expressed their elation. And I find a number of questions. If you allow me, I can read the questions.
Sure. I don't need to allow you.
So the first question comes from Shoheli Mondal. She asks, the very act of studying the tribes or Dalits or demarcating them as subject of study engenders an equation of power which relegates the subject studied upon as the marginal and powerless and the observer as someone holding power, authority, and superior. Madam, don't you think that behind the facade of activism, there remains an indication of looking down upon the underdog by a godly, benevolent mother figure, as was in the case of Panchita Devi?
Yes, absolutely. I agree to this. And I think people who are working with the tribes, in fact, at present, I'm working with the tribal literature and literature belonging to these areas. We are outsiders. We are simply encroachers. But, then what is needed is actually who people over here I may be coming to a little problematic water when I say that the very concept of reservation, I supported the concept in the sense that it was meant to empower these people so that they could go back to their own people and speak what is not spoken about. All right. But sadly, what I see is the people who enjoy at present all these reservations and these things, they do not wish to return. Very rarely do they return back to their roots and try to highlight what remains hidden. And what actually by what remains hidden, I don't talk about their intellectual property rights, no. The traditional knowledge, no. TK, IPR, these are things that belong to them. Outsiders should not be looking into this. But what is needed, the negative things, all right, the turmoil which they are undergoing, the wrongs that is being done to them, that should actually be brought out by our tribal scholars themselves, the Dalit scholars who are now being empowered, who are empowered. So they should be going back and doing this work. And when they don't do, some people go in. But the word that I always found Mahashweta Devi using is empathy. Don't sympathize. Empathy. But of course, this is an external agency, and I think this is one of the dilemmas we can never really do away with.
Thank you, madam. There's a question from our student, second semester student, Shujishmita Goswami. What was the condition of Vidura's mother, who was also a servant woman? Was she also banished?
Yeah, this I would like to say, this Vidur's mother was certainly not banished from the palace. but Bidur was always known as Dashi Putra. He was never given the equal status as her two as means his two other stepbrothers. He was never given that status. You will find repeated references as Dashiputra. All right.
Thank you, madam. There is a question which is asked by Shudipta Banerjee and also our former student Matralina. They want you to talk about the role of Lord Krishna in the Mahabharata. Please enrich us by sharing, like, what is your take on Lord Krishna?
You know, this Lord Krishna, I look upon him when I read these texts, keeping my religious identity separate. I look upon him as a kind of patriarchal agency because, as I told you, a patriarchal agency created and used by the Aryans to further their geographical, the righteousness of their geographical conquest. You know, this is something, this geographical conquest of the Aryans and kind of using it as a righteous act. This I'm reminded of the Tudor myth. The Tudors in England actually did not have a right to the English throne in that sense because they were actually Henry the Seventh. He belonged to a distant relation of the royalty. So he had to kind of establish his right, and this he did through the divine right theory, which poets and dramatists, all of them started talking about in order to make it a part of the cultural memory. All right, to imbibe it into the cultural psyche. The same thing is being done with the Mahabharata by the Aryans. So Lord Krishna is the know-all and the be-all in this text. He is a kind of patriarchal power, all right, kind of someone, you know, they are talking of certain negatives as the Chidharan of Draupadi and other things. But who is the person? Actually, they are exposing the negative, but at the same time not exposing it. So who is helping them to give it a religious garb? This figure of Lord Krishna. And those of you, Matralina, and I think since all of us are Bengali, I would like you all to read Gajendra Kumar Mitra's Panchajanna. All right, it is a very interesting study of Lord Krishna because the entire story is from the perspective of Lord Krishna. Panchajanna is the name of the shank that Lord Krishna held during the Dharma Yudh, all right, Kurukshetra battle, and he blew this conch to announce the beginning of the battle. So this entire story, it is a kind of an intertext, but it is extremely interesting. Those of you who are interested, please read the text. I love it.
Thank you, madam. There's a question from Mukta Singh. There's a common phenomena in almost every mythical text that I've noticed. Almost all the heroes are depicted as demigods or sons of gods, as is the case with Pandavas. But the women characters do not have such opportunities, and she puts within brackets, I dare say, most of the time. Are they deliberately commonized for some deeper intention? What is your view about it?
Obviously, this does not means. I think this does not require to be said actually that the women are again, if I can say in the words of Buber, the second sex. All right, women need to be kind of, you know, this women need to be kept under the male sovereignty. They are mainly, you know, the under the male rule. Start from Gandhari, all right, the time what Gandhari could have been. She could have been eyes for her blind husband. Whenever I read this text, I find this. Why wasn't she using her eyes to illuminate the darkness of Dhritarashtra? Instead, what does she do? She herself also turns blind. This, as if woman, because if she had her eyesight, given all the qualities Gandhari had, she would have been superior to her narrow-minded, blind husband. So, what do? In the name of religion, wife is not supposed to be superior than husband. Again, the male agency, male power. So what does she do? She ties her eyes up with a piece of cloth. So always in all the characters, if you look at it, the character, again, I would like to talk about Shikhandi. All right, Shikhandi was initially entrusted with the power of Drupad's army, but then Drupad said that women cannot, the moment he actually had performed this yajna in order to have a son who would be able to defeat Dronacharya as a part of revenge between them. So he had asked for a son, but initially Draupadi came out, and next came out a boy who the gods said would be helping him to defeat Dronacharya. So as soon as this boy comes of age, he is made the head of the military in that particular country, and Shikhandi is simply removed from her position. When Draupadi goes to argue for this, she is told, you are a girl and she does not have an identity, so please don't talk to me. Such powerful positions are for men alone. So again and again, we find this being repeated.
Thank you, madam. Pooja Banerjee has a question. I would like to ask you about Draupadi's being divided among the 5 Pandavas. Can it be considered as a lack of choice on the woman's part? For she loved Arjuna as far as my knowledge goes.
Yes, she loved Arjuna. This is said in the Mahabharata also, because when they go for, when they start their last walk, Mahaprasthane Pathe, if you read that, when they start their last journey, Draupadi falls on the way. And when Dhritarashtra is asked, not Dhritarashtra, when Yudhishthir is asked, why did Draupadi fall? What was her sin? He says that she was supposed to love her 5 husbands equally. All right. As if, this is some kind of a mechanical device. Emotions. Love is an emotion, but it is supposed to be mechanical, equally distributed, 20% for each husband. But she loved Arjuna more. That was a sin. She falls for that. So obviously, there is an agency here. And as I was telling y'all about Panchojono, over there it is said that even this, the fact that Draupadi should be divided amidst the 5 husbands, was a planning of that great male patriarch, Lord Krishna. Why? Because he knew that if Draupadi was in love with Arjun, and to a certain extent, Arjun, though he had multiple other wives, all right, he also was attracted towards Draupadi. So the fear was, if they came together, then probably Arjun would forget all about his final destination. What should be his final aim? Right from the beginning, actually, or everything was being done to prepare the Pandavas for that final battle, the Dharma Yuddha. So they would lose focus. So you all know the story. Just when before Draupadi was supposed to come to Arjun as his wife, Arjun was banished by her brother, because there was some laws relating to this marriage, and one of the laws was that when Draupadi was in the chamber of one brother, other brother should not enter that chamber. But again, Arjuna, disguised as a Brahmin, came to Arjun, asked him for help, and said, "You have to help me at any cost." And Arjun's bow, the Gandev, was in the chamber of chamber of Yudhishthir. So obviously, Arjun had to enter that chamber, and as a punishment, he was banished for 12 years. In the course of these 12 years, you all know Arjun married a number of women. Again, when the 12 years was about to end, and Arjun was supposed to come back to Hastinapur and to Draupadi, again Lord Krishna intervened. And what was that? He helped Arjun to run away with his own sister. And when Arjun returned to Hastinapur, his sister accompanied Arjun. So this is entire politics, behind this, the scheming that goes behind.
Thank you, madam. There's a very interesting question asked by Somnath Mukherjee. As the phonetic similarity between Sena Nayak in Devi's story and the Senapati in the epic draws the attention of the readers, how far the role of Sena Nayak in the gang rape of the tribal girl Dept can be compared with the passive role of the Senapati Vishwa in the humiliation of Draupadi in the court of assembly as well as in the epic?
Yeah, we can think of it like that, because when Draupadi, during her Chidharan, when she was brought to the, her hair was caught hold of and pulled by Dushashan, and she was brought to the royal hall where all the elders were sitting. Obviously, someone should have intervened, and Draupadi kept asking each one of them, but all of them remained speechless. But over here, the thing is that Bhishma had, again, in different part of the epic, he has accepted that he never supported this act. But he could not talk because of his allegiance to the throne of Hastinapur. He was not supposed to speak against the king or his deputy. So he had to maintain silence. But over here, the Sena Nayak is the patriarchal agency. Unlike Krishna in the epic, Lord Krishna, here the Sena Nayak is the one who orders the gang rape. That had not been done by Bhishma. He remained silent. All right, by remaining silent, he might have aggravated the situation, but he wasn't the cause of the situation. Here, the Sena Nayak is the cause of the situation. So, though there is a similarity, there is difference too.
There are three more questions, madam. Devopriya asks a question. Although there lies differences in the characterization of Mahabharata's Draupadi and Dept in different perspectives as per Devi's depiction, why Mahashweta Devi's Dept is also regarded as an agent of this patriarchal society, although she becomes successful in subverting the physicality of her body as a tool of powerful resistance against this cult of patriarchal society?
I didn't get the question exactly.
Yeah, I'm repeating.
Lost somewhere in between. If you would.
I'm repeating. Why is Mahashweta Devi's Dept also an agent of patriarchal society? That's what Devopriya means to ask.
All right. Dept is, I told you, she is an innocent girl, a young girl. Her age is given, and she was happy in her life with Tulna Maji, though full of all kind of difficulties.
Madam, I think Devopriya wants to ask, why did Devi not make Dopti as a heroine, subverting patriarchal authority very boldly or strongly, something like that she wants to know.
No, but in the end, Dopti does become the heroine. Whenever I think of this concept of Yagya Seni, someone rising from fire, so a woman who has been battered, who has been gang raped, bleeding from every aspect, standing straight, look with her head held high. In fact, Devi does right. She had her head high. So head held high. I can at least visualize invisible flames all round her, and she is in the true sense the power. She is the power. So I will say that she is the central character. I would never consider the Senanayak the main character in this text. Dopti is the central character. Next.
Two more questions. One is asked by Krishna. When Arundhati Roy's Doctor and the Saint was published, the issue of representation of the Dalits resurfaced. What are your views on that particularly, and the issue of representation of the marginalized in general?
See, this actually needs a lot of discussion. This is again a different issue, because this her way of looking at the concept of the marginalized and Devi's way of looking at the concept of the marginalized are totally different views, all right, which are again influenced by their own socio-cultural position, if I can say that. So I would prefer Krishna to get in touch with me, and I will tell him of some text which he can read for him to understand this better, actually.
Madam, two more questions. One by Shagun. Shagun wants to know, how has Mahashweta Devi connected nature with her projection of the female or the feminine. And another question by Juthi, the last one. Juthi asks, yes, I just want to know, Draupadi in Mahabharata is presented as someone who revolts against the patriarchy, who rejects to tie her hair and wear the crown given by the Pandavas after the Vastraharan. But at the same time, she asks the boon from Shiva to remain virgin, as if she surrenders to the rule of patriarchy. Can you please discuss about the dichotomy of her character in that respect? These are the two questions.
Yes, this is very interesting, because this is what, in fact, over here, the story of the Chidharan, or the story of her being a virgin, always a virgin, all right. She was said to be Okhatojoni, all right, the term was used. So always being a virgin, this is not really related to this text, but I find it very important in bringing out the dichotomy of the character of Draupadi, and that is why I referred to that incident actually. So Draupadi is very much an agency, but she is a kind of puppet in the hands of a male agency. Over here I'm talking about the author. If we think of the Mahabharata, it is a kind of, we say it is written by Vedavyas, or it was written down by Lord Ganesh and related by Vedavyas. But the truth is, there was a superpower who was writing this. All right, the author. Whoever the author, unknown author. And that author kind of uses Draupadi as a tool to bring about the fall of the Kauravas. So she is given power, but at the same time, she is not given power. She keeps with the tradition of the faithful wife, the virgin wife. She has to maintain that tradition. So comes in the story of the boon of Lord Shiva, and again she must act as the reason for the battle, And some of you, as I'm talking about this, there is a common saying, some people, I find some people saying this came up in a workshop in feminism, women's studies, there was a workshop. And over there, Nari Noroketa. All right, there is a concept like that. And example given is Draupadi. Draupadi was the reason of the battle between the brothers. Had Draupadi not made such a promise, there might not have been the battle. But again, as I come to Panchajanna again, over there Lord Krishna says, Draupadi, you are but the wheels of a chariot driven by me. Chariot, it is, if we think of that poem to his coy mistress, over there, the chariot of time that is moving. And who is driving this chariot? The Lord himself, Lord Krishna, or male agency, whatever we say. He has an agenda. What is that? The establishment of the Pandavas on the throne of Hastinapur, or the establishment of dharma, within quote again, dharma, whatever it is, because it differs from person to person. And Draupadi is, in a minor way, the cause of that actually battle. But again, at the end of the battle, what happens? Draupadi loses her 5 sons. She had 5 sons. So she loses her 5 sons, and this is said, somewhere it is written, that this was the penalty she paid because she was the cause of the battle. So at the same time, she is becoming a cause of the battle, but at the same time, it is looked upon as a sin. All right, it is a sin that she wanted the blood of the brothers. All right, so it is a sin. And how does she pay for that sin? Terrible punishment for any mother to lose all her sons. All right, so Draupadi is just an instrument used in one hand by the author as his agency. He had the agency of establishing the Aryan right over this geographical location, and the patriarch within the text, Lord Krishna, who again uses her as a tool. That is why, Lord Krishna, she is said to be the Shokhi of Krishna. If she is the Shokhi, the friend of Lord Krishna, then why is she made to go through so much agony? And at the same time, she only pays the penalty for that agony. There are, multiple readings regarding this. Okay, Ayan. Anything more?
Madam, about Shagun's question, if you can...
yes, just repeat.
How was Devi blending nature with the feminine in her literary woven?
I won't say that much blending of nature with feminine. Rather, she blends the nature's people with nature. She is speaking, when she's speaking of nature, she's speaking more of the nature's people, that is the Adivasis, how the forest belongs to them. I began, remember, with the rights for the forest, rights of the forest. So over there, the right of these people for the forest. So nature over there is kind of brought to be in union with them, with the people at large, not female specifically. That I won't say.
Thank you so much now. Now over to my student Abhilal. Abhilal, are you there?
Okay, just a minute. One thing, since this is homecoming for me, I would like to say something. Yesterday, I had a very pleasant surprise, and I congratulate the present head, Mr. Ayan Mondal, soon to be Dr. Ayan Mondal. we are happily waiting for that. When Abilal rang me up and said, "Ma'am, I'm welcoming you to the program tomorrow." That was a very nice surprise, and he spoke very sweetly. He did his job very well. So
Thank you, ma'am.
congratulations to both the teacher and the student.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So now I would request my teacher, Mr. Tapus Das, Faculty, Department of English, Bankura Christian College, to deliver the vote of thanks to our honorable speaker. Please, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
You're audible.
I feel privileged enough to propose on behalf of the Department of English, Bankura Christian College, our indebtedness to the two distinguished speakers, resource persons, Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha sir and Professor Nivedita Mukherjee ma'am, who have been kind enough to spare their valuable time despite their hectic schedule. I, on behalf of all the participants, acknowledge with sincere gratitude and thankfulness some new perspectives in studies and further researches that they have opened up through their enlightening lectures. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I humbly acknowledge the participation of all the audience over YouTube Live and Google Meet. Please join tomorrow with our two eminent speakers, Dr. Dipankar Sen sir and Dr. Nilanjana Bhadro ma'am. Please join at the schedule.
Dr. Suranjana Bhadro.
Suranjana.
Dr. Suranjana Bhadro. Yes.
Yes, sorry, sir. Mistake. Please join tomorrow at the scheduled time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, An.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.